If you remove some of the barriers to entry, some of the requirements that are needed within the bylaw, and the length of permitting that's required, it can take 3 to 4 months to get a permit done on something. You'll see a stronger response from landlords, a greater investment and a willingness to do it once some of that red tape is removed.
So what's the best case scenario then to get some of these secondary suites through? What are we looking for? Turnaround of a couple of months, get it to code, inspected, ready to go?
I mean, I'd like to see it set up so that it could be developed on any RC1 property, where you've got to follow the appropriate building permit. The suites have to be built to code. Mm-hmm. They would then exist on the city's radar. They would be taxed more for additional waste service and recycling. It would be then recognized. The city would be making revenue from it, and another affordable housing dwelling unit would be created.
And you think that with some of that revenue, you mentioned earlier, densification, of course, you're going to get local businesses are going to spawn up as well.
The permitting stuff too. The city will make money off the permitting and the inspections along the way.
Which could lead to better infrastructure in the neighborhood, potentially.
You could put that money back in the communities where it's happening too, right?
What about landlords though? I think it puts landlords a bit more on the hook. I touched on it earlier. With the opportunity to rent somewhere else for a lower rate or an affordable rate, I mean, those that own homes don't reside there but are landlords, you think would have to be really up to snuff to ensure that these renters are happy and want to stay there. Secondary suites, I think, would aid. No?
It might take some pressure off, but I think the ball is in the landlord's court right now. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but they have the control in this market. I mean, less than 1% rental. The renters are paying, $1,200 a month for a 1 or 2 bedroom suite in Bowness, and that's gone up 50% over the last 18 months, I would guess. So the ball is in the landlord's court, and that's supply and demand, one could argue, but
I would be happy to trade much stricter enforcement of non-conforming secondary suites for an easier path to legalization. So, if you went out and removed the red tape and say, all right, landlords, if you're willing to go and invest the $30,000 to $40,000, which is what it costs to develop some of these things, if you're willing to make the investment, we're going to remove some of these barriers to you. But now we're going to start getting hard on the landlords that are dodging the rules, that are running a shady business practice and not having safe suites, that sort of thing. Right now, if you've got an illegal basement suite, bylaw can come and shut it down. I'd like to see that ramped up to further fines, stuff on title, that sort of thing, to provide an honest and a much stronger incentive to landlords to go through the motions and legalize it.
There's certainly an issue with the illegal suites, period. The legalization is a separate issue, but the illegal suites, renters can't even phone in to complain about something that's unsafe or unethical or illegal, because if the bylaw officers come, they lose their home with no recourse. So it really puts the renter in a bad situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Crime, though. I want to talk a little bit about crime. It's easy to say, well, high density rental properties are going to bring more crime just based on, people on the street. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I try to look at Calgary as an example. I gravitate towards Forest Lawn. I imagine that, there is a lot of rental properties there. It does have a high rate of crime. Is that necessarily a model that will be repeated in our city if we have an abundance of secondary suites? I know it's a general question. What's your gut say, though?
I don't think Forest Lawn is a good example, for one. I think if you're talking high density, Forest Lawn is not a high density neighborhood. If you want to talk high density, you can go to Cliff Bungalow or Sunnyside or somewhere like that also has a high renter population. And I think if you look at the crime stats, they're higher than the suburbs, but they're not ghettos or dangerous by any means.
I think, as we've been saying, these secondary suites are already out there. They're the clandestine sort of smoke and mirrors secondary suites that haven't gone through, the appropriate channels for legalization. So they're already there. I think if you amend the bylaw to make it easier to develop them, it's not like more of these bad ones are all of a sudden going to appear. It's going to be more of the good ones. The landlords that have been wanting to make that investment are now going to have the ability to do so. And I don't think that is going to change the crime picture. I don't think you're going to see an increase just because of that.
And you have to look at the density you have to look at the per capita. The suburbs have less crime, but they also have far, far fewer people. If you look at the rate per 1,000 people, there really isn't much of a difference between inner city and outside.
Point. And that's fair. That's a really good point. Folks, we're almost out of time here. We're going to take our last break. Stay with us.
I think that people are worrying about, when it comes to having more renters in communities, that they're losing that sense of community as a home buyer. I I don't think that that's the way that we should look at it. Really, we're such an upcoming city. I say this all the time, full of young professionals, students, and I just think that we need to embrace the fact that we're going to have these kind of people renting in a community that may have only been home buyers up till a certain point. So I think it's great. I think people are complaining kind of for no reason.
Guys, we've only got a couple of minutes left here. Our city's huge. I mean, the sprawl isn't slowing down, it seems. I'm wondering, again, I guess I'm trying to put the pieces together. Clearly, you hear the adage, we need to grow up before we grow out. Rental properties are going to have a huge play in that, will they not?
I think, it's called gentrification. The old becomes
you hear
the
that
new.
word a lot?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the old becomes the new. So as a property, becomes older and less functional for someone of today, it points more towards redevelopment. And as an owner of the property might move out, they turn it over to a rental until it makes time to tear it down. So a lot of times you see that in certain communities. They'll go from homeowners to lots and lots of renters, and then it changes quite quickly as you start to see redevelopment.
Densification, I think, makes sense overall. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't think there's much of an argument against it. It's more efficient. It lets more people in. You're closer to services. It helps the businesses, the retail. It's really just a matter of how you densify and the rate and where you choose it. There's a lot of neighborhoods like Montgomery or Bowness, even somewhat, that had a lot of single-family houses that are now being infilled or smaller, multifamily units being put in.
Yeah.
Not those are bad, but you have to make sure they're in the right context. But density is a major bullet in solving a lot of our issues.
Is it going to happen? You think these builders will be on the hook for this $4,800? It was a big election issue. I think it could potentially curb some of this outward growth.
I saw somewhere that we've got the same footprint as New York City.
Pretty
or something.
ridiculous. A city of about 8 million.
It's
whatever,
crazy.
10 million.
I think we are out far enough. We've got the ring road there now to kind of set the limits of the exterior of the city, and I'd like to see us start building up. But it takes a different mentality from the development community and from City Council to approve some of these projects.
I'm not ideological on it. I think if you want to live in the suburbs and in your single-family house, then go ahead, but at least make the playing field fair and create
Pay for it.
Yeah, and create the opportunities for people that want to move in the inner city and have the place to live. The urbanization of cities is a major trend, and most people under 40 choose to be in the inner city.
Ride
in the
the
inner
bike
city.
to work, walk to
There's
work,
an
going
expense,
for
and
a car.
there are drawbacks to it, but we have to start creating more of those opportunities in Calgary.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think the city potentially has failed in that regard up to this point. Hopefully, moving forward, we can see that. Because, I agree. And I don't think it's just people under 40. I think it's people across the gamut that if they can, they like to walk their neighborhood. If you live in Calgary and you're outside of the core or even near the river, for example, you need to own a car.
Yeah.
And then you have that added expense. I hope the shift happens. What more can the average citizen, really do at this stage to ensure it happens? We voted the guy in, I guess.
Talk to your counselor.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah, or pay the money to live inner city and make it more attractive for developers to go and turn projects around.
So what happens. That'll be the final word. Thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight. As always, an informative discussion. You can keep the conversation going on Facebook as well as Twitter. If you have a show topic you'd like us to discuss, by all means, drop us a line. Take care. Have fun.